Welcome, welcome, everyone. We are going to get started talking about a Waldorf-inspired approach in family childcare and this concept of nurturing children's imagination. Very quickly, for those who don't know me, my name is Grace Eilers. I am the Family Childcare Content Specialist for Satellite, and I am extremely excited to introduce my co-presenter for tonight's event. So I'll turn it over to Vicki.
Thank you, Grace, and I'm thrilled to be here. This is my second time doing this with Grace, and in the meantime, Grace has become herself an expert in Waldorf education. I would maybe not an expert, she's shaking her head, but definitely well-versed. I'm Vicki Kingsbury. They call me Miss Vicki. I work at Prairie Hill Waldorf School, which is in Pewaukee, Wisconsin, and you may have driven by it actually, because you see it from 94 when you're heading to or from Milwaukee to Madison. Um, I graduated once upon a time from University of Massachusetts, and then in communications, and then I took something called, maybe some of you have heard of it, Lifeways, Early Childhood and Human Development Program. They are actually out of Wisconsin when I first took it, but they're now all over the country, and they have childcare um, childcare operations in all over the country as well, one here in Milwaukee, as a matter of fact. And it really, their motto is life is the curriculum and home is the model. So Lifeways actually takes its inspiration from the roots of Waldorf education and the developmental research that we'll be talking about, just the background of Rudolf Steiner, who started Waldorf education. In any case, I graduated actually last summer. I spent the summer finishing up my capstone project, which was, and I'm going to share this with you because I might be speaking about it a little bit later, practical strategies for helping preschoolers with the increased anxiety that we've been seeing since the pandemic. So I did my capstone project on that last summer. And I found my way to Waldorf education the way many of us who do, looking for a holistic approach to working with children. So I think the more you learn tonight about Waldorf, the more you'll see how healing and curative it is. So that's my background, and thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to, mostly I was telling Grace at the end, my favorite part, and hopefully yours too, will be to ask questions. I love answering questions about it. So if you have any, certainly you can ask them, but even write them down so that we can spend more time interacting rather than hearing just me speak about things that are theoretical. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicki. Before we dive into things, just going to quickly outline our learning objectives for this training. Hopefully, by the end of tonight's event, you'll have a better understanding of the play-based principles of a Waldorf education approach, similar to what Vicki was just describing, that holistic play-based principles that we'll be diving into. Also, we are going to be talking a lot about how you actually do this in practice. So through music, through something called handwork that we are going to dive into more, storytelling and art, to just name a few that are different different activities that you can do throughout the day to be more Waldorf inspired. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how to do this in family childcare. As Vicki just mentioned, home is the model for Lifeways, which is not the same as Waldorf, but still you hear this time and time again. Um, the importance of that home-like, cozy home-like environment for children. And I know most, if not all of you, are coming here as family child care providers, family child care educators, working in your homes. So you already have that going for you, having that cozy home-like environment to, if this inspires you, potentially implement more Waldorf-inspired activities and philosophy approaches in your home. But before we do that, we are going to dive in to begin with the basics, make sure that everyone has the same understanding. When we use the word curriculum, what are we talking about? And we are talking about the fact that curriculum is what you do. It's everything that you do in your program, from your activities that you do, the way you structure your day, your routine, how you set up mealtime, how you interact with children. And ultimately, this is leading to what children are learning. So that's what we are referring to for the purposes of tonight's event when we talk about curriculum. And a curriculum philosophy, like Waldorf, is this educational framework that is guiding what you do in your program. So they're also referred to as approaches or methods, but they offer that set of values to consider when caring for and teaching young children. And that's leading to the how of children's learning. We are going to start off strong with a small group activity. Again, this will be where your mute and unmute button and your start and stop your video button will be the most important, because this is a time where you are going to be in a room talking about your work with other people in the same profession. How often do you get to do that? And the prompt that you will be talking about is essentially, how do you currently plan what you do? How do you currently plan what you do? All right. Well, we're finally getting to this question. What is Waldorf education? This is what we're going to be diving into today. And before we do that, we are going to, well, I guess to begin the discussion about Waldorf, we are going to start by placing it in history, in its historical context. So think right after the First World War had ended, we're in Germany. It's, you know, the late, around 1919. And the owner of the Waldorf Astoria cigarette factory came to this man right here, his name is Rudolf Steiner, and asked him to create a school for the children of his employees. So Rudolf Steiner said, yep, that's great. I can do that. And I'm also going to create a whole philosophy on top of that, because it's going to be that unique and that different than any other educational model that is out there at this time. And that's what he did. So that's why it's called Waldorf education. You can see here on the screen, that is the first school that opened in 1919. And it was different. It was comprehensive, artistically enriching, focused on the arts, and it was open to all children. So including all genders and all backgrounds. So you had boys, girls, children of factory owners, children of factory workers, all in the same school. And it's important, as we're placing it in this historical context, to note that this was originally developed for school-aged children, but has since broadened to include early childhood education, which is what we'll be focused on today. Vicki, do you have anything you want to add on the history?
No, you did a really good job explaining it. Thank you.
Okay. And now we are going to watch, I sent out this video beforehand, just to set the atmosphere of what a video of showing what a Waldorf school and the Waldorf education model looks like.
She came out and she said, which school has this girl come from?
They saw me as not just a brain, but as a person with an inner life.
最开始的时候，孩子这样一个种子一样发展。
Wherever people went, they'd say, I walk into a Waldorf school and I know it's a Waldorf school.
Right now, Waldorf education is an international movement. It's a very, very fast-growing movement.
There are more than 1,000 schools, there are more than 2,000 kindergartens in nearly 90 countries around the world. It's like the prototype of a grassroots movement.
I'm convinced they're all coming in with a question, that they're all saying, I'm looking for something new, something which is going to be important for the future.
Waldorf education really meets or correspond with our old wisdoms.
The fundamental thing that they do best is experience belonging.
Oder den anderen finden, den anderen Menschen finden, heißt auch gleichzeitig mich selbst finden.
It sees educating young children in the ways of justice and peace and brotherhood as more important than anything else.
And this is basically all about what we are doing, huh? Giving space to this light in everyone.
I look at this child and I see that this child has a more caring attitude towards other children. I look at this child and I see when this child plays, there's a lot of imagination, a lot of creativity that comes into their play.
wirkliches Interesse an der Welt und an den Menschen in der Welt.
And what we call social sculpting, how to bring it into economy, bring it into governance, bring it into the ecological movement.
The need for a more human education where you can become oneself.
This is what joins us together, to actually more and more feel that despite of all the challenges, there is hope for the future.
Und da sehe ich ein ganz großes Entwicklungsfeld.
And that's exactly what Waldorf education would do. It's just planting the seeds.
Denn Aufmerksamkeit schenken ist eigentlich Liebe.
So that is actually a trailer for a documentary that is open for anyone to watch, and I can send that out after in a follow-up email. But just some key takeaways that I noticed is that in that video, there was a wide range of ages that you saw, a lot going on. And I'm sure you're probably wondering, well, what is this going to look like in my family childcare program? And that is what we are going to dive into today. So just a couple of different key points, principles of Waldorf education to make note of before we go in further is that Waldorf education, as you heard from the video, it is different. It's a new approach, or it's a very contrasting approach to the typical educational model that we have here in the West. And that it is non-academic and play-based. Correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki. Do you want to say more about that? That you don't focus on letters and numbers?
We don't actually until first grade is when they start to learn each letter and they start to read. And there's, you know, a lot involved in that. It's like the introduction of the letter A might take 1 week, and we'll do stories about it and so forth. So it's a really rich but very it seems delayed, but we look at where they are developmentally, and we feel that early childhood should be all about play. That is their work. So.
Right. And that focuses on play, imagination, and creative expression, learning through doing. And also there's a huge emphasis, you heard this in the video, and I'm going to say it again, and you're going to keep hearing it, on belonging in a group, in a community, and empathy and those social skills that are so important for children to learn at a very early age.
And Grace, I would just add, based on the video too, you probably got this feeling of the unity involved in the compassion. It is really a social impulse that Rudolf Steiner started Waldorf education 100 years ago. It was out of a social impulse. So it's really an important aspect of Waldorf education.
Thanks, Vicki. And speaking of Rudolf Steiner, he organized this idea of how individuals learn. You educate them through the head, the heart, and the hands. This is how he phrased this idea. It also could be referred to as thinking, feeling, and doing. And this represents educating the whole person. But young children spend a lot of time, their primary focus is on the hands. So learning through doing and active physical exploration. And so all forms of learning, therefore, should be learning through the hands, something that's tangible. That is the way in which the young child learns through this Waldorf perspective. Anything you want to add, Vicki?
Just that, you know, it's learning through doing, as you said, Grace, but if you're a childcare provider or a parent or a nanny, when you're watching children, I feel like you're an anthropologist, you know, you're really like play-based means that children, that's their work is their play, and we need to sort of get out of their way, not play with them, but remove the obstacles in the way of them being able to play and do their work. Yeah, I just feel like there's something about being a teacher or a childcare provider or even a parent with young children that we really need to learn to just do a lot of observation and because they'll share like what they need by showing you. You know, they may not be able to communicate it to you verbally, but they'll show you by playing and by doing. So just wanted to add that.
I love that. It's a great segue. And before we get to the video that I want to share of an example of this, just wanted to note too, the heart, the primary age group that is more focused on the heart is more middle childhood, you know, a lot about that, those feelings. And then the head, that analytical thinking, the reasoning, that emerges more in adolescence. So there's that progression as well too throughout development.
Thank you.
Yep. And now here is a video example of learning through doing. You all see this every day. So I know you do. We are going to watch the child in the light gray shirt attempt to pour water from one vessel to another. And there is no sound. So the child is learning through doing. He first tries to pour water with the spoon, and then, you know, that doesn't work really well to his liking. So he just picks up the entire pot and pours it into the smaller pot. And, you know, that worked a little bit better in terms of getting the water over there, but there was still a lot of spilling going on. So, maybe next time he might try a different approach. And I just think about, and I know what Vicky was saying earlier doesn't come naturally. It doesn't come naturally to just as a teacher, at least for me, to sit back and just hold your tongue and just wait and let the child figure it out, because you didn't get into this field because you got into this field. I'm assuming part of the reason why is because you love to help and you love to care for others. So you want to help children figure things out. We're going to be talking a lot today about holding space for them to wonder, to problem solve. And one other thing I wanted to bring in, particularly about family childcare, is that you have a mixed age group. So does anyone here know of any older children in the group who just love to fix problems for younger children? Love to help, love to solve problems, and that's great. We want to support helping behavior. But there is a balance, because if you have older children who are just constantly doing things for the younger children, well, they're not going to have the same opportunities to problem solve and to reason and to think through and to learn through doing. So there is that balance too. I wanted to bring that lens in of the mixed age group. I know I was that child. I am the oldest of 4 girls. So I know I was the one that wanted to care and wanted to fix and solve all the problems. So sometimes you may have to say, "You are so kind for wanting to help. Let's have them try to do it themselves first." Anything you want to say about that, Vicky?
No, go ahead, keep going. I think that was great. That's perfect.
Yeah. And feel free if this is something that you see. Oh, I see some chat messages. Yes. Yeah. So it's not only, you have to think about the whole group, the culture of the whole group. Are children having those opportunities to learn through doing? But there is a balance, because helping behavior that's what gives you the warm, fuzzy feeling inside. And that's what gives the child who's helping and the child who's being helped that fuzzy feeling. But there is that balance as well. And now we're going to go into even more talking about the role of you as the educator. And we have a Waldorf educator here with us, Vicky, to talk about her experience in preschool with preschool age children. But before we get into that, we are going to go into a small group activity to think about how would you currently respond. So picture this. You are outside in your backyard and you see one of your children, just their hands are cupped like this child in the photo here, and they are just observing, staring at an acorn. So how would you respond to that? Would you respond? What would you say? There is no one right answer to this question. Again, this is just to get us all thinking about how you currently would show up in this situation. And then we're going to compare it to how a Waldorf educator would show up. So we're going to take 7 minutes for this. Laura, could you please open the breakout rooms? I set a
Sure
timer on my
thing.
phone.
All
Thank you.
right.
So, did you guys think it was a fun question? I love thinking about how I would respond to children. I see you're smiling, Vicky. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I love the breakout sessions. My new friends in the breakout sessions had one thread of similarity, which was that they all put it back to the children. In other words, the children ask a lot of questions about things that they find, but I love this, that they all said, as teachers, as childcare providers, as parents, that they, put it back, into them and say, I wonder what that is, and where did you find it? And so that is a really beautiful thing, because we just got finished talking about how, we want the children to learn in their own time, in their own unfolding, in a very kind of organic way. That's what Waldorf education is about. And you do, as we can all say as adults too, that that's the best way to learn, when you're learning from when you're ready to learn, and you can receive it, not when somebody just, you're a vessel and somebody's pouring out things to you and you just have to receive them without any context. So love that.
Right. You're involving the child in the process.
Yes, exactly, Grace.
And that ties very well into what this is the main concept that we are going to be talking about, is you as the educator fostering this sense of wonder and imagination. So I look at, just to quickly explain the images that you see on the slide, if you think about an acorn, you could easily come over to that child and be like, this is an acorn. It comes from this type of tree, and you found it on the ground, which means, bring them the facts. But in a Waldorf program, as a Waldorf educator, you want to foster that wonder. So you wonder with the child, what could this be used for? I wonder what this is, what it's called. And through that, the child could come up with all sorts of ideas. It could be an earring for a tree. An acorn top could be a hat for a bird, or maybe it's a rattle for a squirrel. All of those ideas could have been stifled if you as the adult came over and just started giving the facts right away. So, Vicky, you want to talk more about this? I know
I
this is something
do,
you're
yeah.
passionate about.
This is something I'm super passionate about. So a couple things. One, as the educator that you are, in a Waldorf setting, we talk about, the educator shapes and influences the children's environment. And we always try to be worthy of imitation, because as you know, you just said it too, Grace, that children are sponges. And so they're, and they're using all of their senses. That's why another friend I just met in one of the breakout sessions talked about sensory experiences and activities that they give the children. And that's because children are very sensory prone. They're using all of their senses in their environment to figure things out at such a young age. And that's how they learn. And so we need to be worthy of imitation in terms of, how we bring things to them, and so really modeling equanimity, modeling just looking and saying, I wonder. I'm going to give you an example. So we talked about the acorn, but, a lot of you were saying that, or observing that children ask a lot of questions. Rather than answering the questions, in a Waldorf school, we say, I wonder, oftentimes, because we want to put it back to the child. So I would say, that's a really good thing to do, to get used to sort of a mantra of just saying, I wonder. Another thing is if they ask, for example, why are you watering the plants? I know I could explain to them all about the science of why, a plant needs the water and what they do in oxygen. But instead I'll say, because they're thirsty, you want to help, you may help me water the plants, and then have them help me water the plants. So if we try not to answer their questions, I'll say this, with technical responses, because that takes them out of their imaginative, like dreamlike consciousness. And it wakes them up to things that they don't need to be concerned about at age 2, 3, and 4, and 5 even. They'll learn that soon enough. So, so I think, the best thing I can say about that is, to just really do what you were saying, some of you were saying, just say, I wonder, and ask them, and have them come upon it in a much more organic way of learning about that. Because explaining to that thing explaining to them things that are really technical at an early age will just make them like, averse to learning. It might be too much for them. So yeah, just answering, I wonder, and having them demonstrate what they want with it is a really beautiful way to go.
It's a world where magic is real for children. So
I
you're
love
just,
that.
and what a great way of still offering an explanation to a child. Why are you watering the plant? Like they want to know, they want you to answer, but you're using terms that a child can understand. The plant is thirsty. Want to help water the plant? Like that's a great example.
And I often think, Grace, that and all of you, that if we can enter their world, that is so much richer and more meaningful to them, to meet them where they are. So, as another example, we're trying to really help them at age, in my Wonder Garden classroom, that's what we call it actually, Wonder Garden, for 3 and 4-year-olds. We're teaching them some things about making sure that we call it form, but hanging up their coat when they get inside, putting on their slippers before, or their inside shoes before they come into the classroom. Certain things that they do before they come in, and it's the good daily habits to get into. And we're doing that to really help them incorporate it into their habit life so they don't have to think about it. But I love that it's done in their world. So like if they don't pick up their jacket and it's on the ground, I'll say, oh no, where does where does your coat? Your coat's on the ground. Where does it need to be? It must have fallen and it doesn't like to be on the ground. Where does it like to be? Or just things like, or your boots must kiss the wall. Things like in phrases and things that help them understand that you are in their world with them at their age, so that they're still in that dreamlike, wonder-like existence. We don't want to, give them too much too soon in a Waldorf education.
I love the way you explained that, Vicki. And next we're going to talk about another very important thing to do in a Waldorf program, and that is storytelling. And we're going to start with a video.
Oops, I'm not hearing it, Grace.
Oh, sorry, Vic, I accidentally muted you. My apologies. Do that again. Okay.
Storytelling plays a really crucial role in children's upbringing because it's here they're introduced to language and literature, the rhythm of words, the pattern. They're all starting to get it in their little heads. And when they come to reading, they're at a great advantage because they've understood it.
Once upon a time, there was a princess. She lived in a big pink house.
Telling stories to your children also sort of fosters imagination, where they start to come to some understandings of the world they're living in. Well, I've been telling stories for a long time in libraries over the years, and I've found that children will believe anything you tell them, and you can use anything to tell them. I think I've used toilet roll holders with pipe cleaners stuck to them to make a whole little family. I'll tell a story with an apple where I'll cut it in half and reveal a beautiful star. I have all sorts of things I'll pull out of a bag. So maybe when parents were starting to think about storytelling, maybe an item that was a treasured thing they'd had from their childhood, maybe a photo that was taken years and years ago. All these things are to prompt language.
And then the mom came. Hello, my dear kitty.
Then you don't see him.
One of the ways to really involve your children in storytelling is perhaps put a bit of action in it. Sometimes I have little rhymes and I'll make children be Muk Muk the owl and the trees in it. So I'm just trying to engage them by getting them to take part in the story. So having those actions really helps. Every opportunity has a story behind it. And what you're really doing as a parent is trying to get them to listen to language and be ready for when they get to school. But one of the other things that I think is really important about storytelling, and for me it was always crucial, is I think your family, your kids should have an understanding of family and who you are and what your stories are. So that's such a wonderfully rich opportunity for storytelling. Who are you? Where are your people from? When did they come to Australia? What was your favourite story as a child? All these things are stories that you could be telling your children.
هلا قبل أول صيادة مرآنا كم خازنة ليلة ورا أخا قم لا ورا بودخ لا ترى ولا غزالة وف كاسدي هت خمبيذة والخيل لا توتو وليلى.
One of the things that children really love is to hear them in stories. So what's something you remember as a little child, a story you've read or heard? Maybe you could put your child in a situation. Maybe they're scared about their first day of school and you're going to tell a little story about how brave they are and how they got through the day. If you put your child in the story, it really sort of brings them into the whole notion of words and music in words and being part of that event of a story. If you're heading off somewhere with your kids, take a bit of time, do a bit of research and find out what you can about where you're going, the locations, and make a real story out of it. And that'll bring enjoyment to the kids. They'll want to really be part of it because they'll feel they're in the story. And this is just another way of getting them, introducing them to their country, their land, their stories and their people. Everything has a story to it. And it's that language development that you're wanting your kids to take on. So everywhere's a chance for story. When they're having a bath, maybe if they're anxious about something coming up the next day, you've got a little story that you're going to just tell them just to put them a little bit at ease. Of course, bedtime is a favourite time for stories. Having tea, sitting around the table. There's so many different occasions where just informally you should be talking to your children.
And now I would encourage all of you to think about, when do you incorporate stories in your program? How do you do that? Is it through books? Is it through verbal stories that you are telling children? We're going to talk about what that looks like in a Waldorf program specifically. But it's important to know that many stories follow a very similar classic story arc. So you have the beginning. So we're just going to do an example here. You got the three little pigs. You meet them, they build their house, one from straw, one from sticks, and one from bricks. And then a conflict comes, and that in the story, as we all know, is the big bad wolf. So he comes and starts stressing the little pigs out. He huffs and he puffs and he blows down the straw house and the stick house. And then, oh, now we're reaching the climax of the story, and all the pigs are in the brick house, and it's scary. And the wolf huffs and puffs and he can't get the brick house to fall down. So as all of you know, he gets really upset. He climbs down the chimney, falls into a pot of boiling water, gets really upset and runs all the way home. And ultimately, the pigs are safe and goodness prevails, and they live happily ever after, as many good characters do in fairy tales. And children learn a lot from stories like this. And that's what Waldorf really tries to bring forward, is using storytelling as a way to teach children different types of life lessons, we'll call it. So in this one, children learn that, hard work pays off. When you think about what house withstood the big bad wolf, it was the brick house, because it took the longest to build and it took the most amount of effort. So and ultimately, stories like these will signal to children that goodness prevails. There will be scary things in life, and goodness prevails in the end. I'll turn it over to you, Vicky, to comment. And you're muted. I'm sorry, I accidentally muted you. That's my bad.
Okay, there we go. Thank you for sharing all that about storytelling. It is a huge integral part of Waldorf education, particularly in early childhood, and we use in early childhood. Somebody in the chat room, Margaret, said something about the pedagogy. We use pedagogical stories, so ones that where there is a challenge that's overcome. And all of Grimm's famous fairy tales all have that component. You know, the Big Bad Wolf and Little Red Riding Hood, the Mean Ugly Troll in Three Billy Goats Gruff. And so we're constantly, the way we do it, actually, I'll share this too, is we tell the story first, like orally, meaning, you know, they'll listen to the story for about a week every day. And we as teachers memorize the story. And then the second week in an early childhood classroom or even in the childcare situation at Lifeways, we then do a puppet play of the story. So a puppet play we make out of wool. I'm going to share with you one of my props here. We use wool to make the characters in the puppet play. So I don't know if you can see this well, but it's just made out of pure wool. And it's very, you can see too, that just like the dolls that we have, you know, it's not that formed because we want, again, to have the children use their imagination when they're seeing a story like this or a puppet play. So then the third week, we find that the children are actually acting out the play. They're using the same words. So I actually last week did a puppet play in the park nearby here. And I did the Three Billy Goats Gruff. And as part of it, I do Who's That Trip Tropping Over My Bridge? Oh no, you don't want to eat me. You want to wait for my bigger brother. He will make a finer meal than I. So I memorize the story and speak it. And then by the second week, and then of course the third week, the children are actually playing out the whole thing. They're using acorns and they're using pieces of wood for the bridge, and they're using pine cones for the three billy goats. And you find that they're actually working through the story. And remember earlier, I told all of you that Waldorf education is curative and healing. Part of that is that they're hearing these stories that have been, you know, how many hundreds of years ago we've been telling the same stories. There is something truly healing about for the children to have agency and know that, you know, challenges will occur, but we'll live happily ever after overall. So it gives them sort of hope and the feeling of goodness. So we also here's another way we use stories. We light story candles at the table. How many of you eat lunch together, let's say, and everybody's talking at once at the table? What we do is at the beginning of the year, I introduce a story candle. If you have something to say, you just put your finger up like this. And this means that you have a story candle, and then teacher or childcare provider will call on you and they can share their story, and then the rest of them will share other stories. So it's another way of telling stories. And sometimes at the beginning of the year, a 3-year-old might say something like, well, I have a dog and his name is Spot, and that might be the story. But by the end of the year, they're telling, we will sometimes have to say, we need to put a bookmark in your story because it's so long, and then we'll continue later. So they really, they love that. We also have something called circle time. And in circle time, we also tell a story, but through song and verses, and those are seasonal. And we really just aim to tell stories with love from the heart. And we generally avoid using illustrated books. I know many of you do in childcare, and that's fine too. In that video you just saw, at libraries, they're going to have story time and they're going to show pictures. But what we do at a Waldorf school is purposely not have the books so that they can form their own pictorial images and really cultivate their imaginations in their mind's eye. So yeah, and that's how they build their vocabulary. So you see two pictures on the screen right now. On the left, you'll see I am in the purple outside, and I do have an outdoor classroom. We're outside 75% of the day, even in the winter time. And that area is a storytime area. There are little pieces of wood that have the children's symbols on them. At the beginning of the year, I assign them a symbol because they can't read yet. So it might be a heart or it might be a bird, and they notice it at their little spot. And then I'll tell them a fairy tale story or a puppet play. It's so amazing. I never, like, even when I see this picture, I think how they sit for like 10 minutes sometimes listening to a story, and they're only 3 years old. Like so their attention span just grows and grows, and it's just a beautiful way to share. The picture on the right is in my Wonder Garden classroom, and you'll notice that there are children actually performing a puppet play for the other children. So this is like usually by the third week, like I said, they know that story, Billy Goat Scruff, by heart, and they're actually performing it for the other children, almost verbatim. It's amazing to see, to witness. So I could speak forever about stories. Oh, actually, one more thing. Sorry. The other thing at the beginning of the year that I tell is I have this gold brass ball. And if you know anything about brass, I didn't know this until I started working with it. It's cold no matter what the season. So it's cold in winter when you touch it. It's cold in the summer when you touch it. But what I do is I tell a story. I won't go into the detail of the story, but it's about prickly Prince Peter. And in it, he is pinching and pulling and pushing all his friends. And so I do this as sort of a discipline piece at the beginning of the year, where he then holds the gold ball and he takes the warmth from his heart and he puts it into his hands. And when the gold ball is warm, his hands are helpful hands instead of harmful hands. And then he can go back and play with his friends and not pinch and just be a friend. And so the reality is, when I do this, after I tell the story, we do have children who might push or pull or pinch. And so we have them sit down, not in a punitive way. I just say, oh, the gold ball's waiting for you. Can you take the warmth of your heart and bring it into your hands? And they hold it so tight. And after about a minute of holding it, no matter, again, what the season is, it becomes almost hot to the touch. So the children have, again, agency over this. They feel like they've transformed this cold gold ball into the warmth and taken their warmth in the heart, and they get so excited. They're like, teacher, look, feel it. And so after a few weeks, the children are actually bringing the gold ball, which I keep in a basket in the classroom or outside when I'm outside. They bring it to another friend who might need it. So they're actually then doing the discipline for us as teachers or as childcare providers, because they know that, once they have it, they can then, they've been able to find really their equanimity and go back in and play. And so that's another way stories are powerful and powerfully transformative.
Yeah, all stemmed from just a story. And I love how that story connects, like, just goodness. You're who you are. We love you for who you are, and you have positive intent towards others, even though sometimes you might make mistakes, and it comes from the heart, and then it transfers it to the hands, which signals to the child that your actions have consequences and they can do harm onto others. And I just love that. And for those who are like, where do I get a brass ball? We can send you one, right, Vicky? I think you
I think I sent a link out last time, so I can
Yeah.
send a link out. They're kind of expensive, but if you can find anything brass, it doesn't have to be a ball. It could be but something that the child can hold and transform. And then the other piece of that is we actually do some proactive holding of the ball. When we're in circle time, I'll take the brass ball out and have everybody put just goodness and warmth and love into the ball, just so that if anyone else needs it, it's there, it's available and filled with love and filled with what they need. So it's, a good example of how a pedagogical story, basically, that they're meaningful stories and you can take them and you can use them throughout the whole year with your children.
And what's so great about family childcare is that you're in a home-like setting with a smaller number of children, and they're all of different ages. So what an interesting troupe of actors for a potential play or a puppet show you would have, where the olders can take on more leadership roles, and model what that can look like, storytelling can look like, and acting through the stories that you're hearing from your teacher. So I just wanted to throw that in there too, is that this can be done with a mixed age group too. It'll just look a
Absolutely.
little different.
Yeah, it is helpful in a big group because, as you know, if anyone's ever worked with, like, I'm with 12 children, it can be pretty chaotic, and there can be some, push and pull with children and, trying to share the same object or the same toy or the same thing. And so it really comes in handy having some pedagogical stories to work with so that it isn't punitive. It's just very loving. Thank you, Grace.
Yeah, and I jumped forward just a couple slides. I do want to make sure that we just acknowledge that we're talking a lot about Grimm's fairy tales or Hans Christian Andersen, but there are so many fables and fairy tales and stories. It is a universal concept that a lot of people point to storytelling as the beginning of language for humans in general as a species. So the idea that we tell and we tell stories, we tell lessons through our language. And so this is universal. You're going to find this all over the world. And it's important to think about the families that you serve. What are stories that might be relevant to their cultural values, their cultural history and customs? Are you asking those questions to families? What stories are you telling your child at home? Or maybe you could incorporate a story about one of the children in your program that is dependent on, a life event that they're experiencing. Maybe they're experiencing a new sibling. What a great topic for a story. So you can stick with the classics. And again, be mindful of the families that you're serving, their culture, what stories. Go ahead, Vicky.
Thank you for that. No, because I just this last Wednesday night went to hear Baba, the storyteller, a West African storyteller. It was so beautiful. He brought music and some of his own stories, and it was a reminder. And we do this at our school. We sometimes change and adjust the stories. So I might have a prince that marries another prince rather than a princess, or I might, have I have a lot of the puppets that I make now are black skinned or just different color skins. I try to sort of adjust some of the classic stories because I like the stories, but I'll adjust it for the children in my class. And so I
Right.
would suggest you do the same.
Yeah, representation matters a
Yeah.
lot. And I have an example video of a story, a fable that you probably can't, can you see this or is it not?
Yep, we can see it. Yep. Can't hear it yet, but we can see it.
No, that's all right. I was
Okay.
gonna skip it anyway. It's
Okay.
not cooperating with me today, just for the sake of time, because I'm going to skip it because I can send it out to all of you afterwards if you are interested. It's just a simple fable that's very common to indigenous cultures of North America. So just another example of a different type of story that would be something that you could share with children. And there is a lesson in there as well. It's about this hen that the coyote tries to trick, and the hen keeps asking questions. And you can go, I've learned this from researching Waldorf and storytelling. You can go really deep into fables and fairy tales. But I will send this out after in a follow-up email. Go ahead, Vicky.
I was going to add one more thing about storytelling in your childcare centers or in your homes. And I think it was broached by the librarian. Whenever I'm really tired, or when my kids were younger and I was really tired and didn't have a story in me, I would just actually tell a story about our day. So you don't really have to think much about it, but it could just be that you share what we just did. Many of you in the first breakout session talked about going out on walks. So it's, you could just talk about what was discovered. And, it doesn't have to be a pedagogical one because they love hearing about themselves. So you could just do a story about your morning and make them laugh and make them giggle and make them, just engage them in that way. So I would suggest that too, if you don't want to rely on fairy tales or other pedagogical stories.
And what a great way of telling children, let's recall what we just did, put it into words.
Yes.
I mean, that there's so many other things that you're teaching children when you're telling stories too, especially ones that involve them about experiences that they've had, right?
Great point. Thanks, Grace. Yeah.
So we talked about storytelling. Now we're going to talk about music. Also another very, very important aspect of the Waldorf education model. But before we go into how Waldorf approaches music, we are going to do another small group activity, breakout room session. And this will be our last of tonight. And the prompt is, again, just to set you where you are right now, coming in today. When, where, and how do you currently incorporate music in your program? So, do you sing? How do you incorporate music? And we will meet for 7 minutes and then come right back. And with that, we will continue talking about music in a Waldorf program. And it just right off the bat, something that's very different from your typical early childhood program is that it is technology free. So no CD players, no recorded music whatsoever. This could, any type of recorded music. Waldorf, it holds very close this idea of music should be organic and come from the body, from the voice, from instruments, from tangible things. And it's one of the main methods that you as an educator are promoting community. So anyone who's ever been in a choir, a part of a choir or a band, you get that sense of belonging in a community when you sing together and when you make music together. So this is something that is promoted. You sing often, play instruments, and dance throughout the day to promote this well-being. So what does this look like in your program, Vicki? Do you sing all day long?
Yes, because I would say, and I just got finished in our breakout session saying that, and I love who was it, Marie, who said she was very brave, and she said at the library where she, I believe, works or volunteers, loves music and loves live music and feels that that is more engaging. So, and it truly is. In our classroom, what it looks like is a simple song announces everything from the end of playtime to the beginning of circle time to the start and finish of lunchtime, cleanup time, which is big. I mean, I don't know what I'd do without a cleanup song. And then throughout transitions. And what you'll find is it's actually, this is a good way to explain it too, that when because we don't want the children in their heads asking a lot of questions, and we answer and for us to answer them, and we want them to wonder and use their imagination. What I find is also a song will help is if they have a lot of questions. I might sing through an activity. So if I'm doing a craft, I might sing a song as I'm doing a craft. And that could help the children also focus on what the craft is. There's another way to that we use music is because we're using it in transitions. So for example, I sing, come little bluebirds, I know you are near. Come little bluebirds, come gather round here. And then I have a long rainbow rope that all 12 children then run like little bluebirds or fly like little bluebirds over to the rope. And that's when we go inside or we go across the parking lot. So together, so by me just singing that song, that is an instruction, but I don't have to tell them, call them, do anything other than sing that song. And where that comes in handy, I mean, it's handy every day, but where I found it actually really came in handy was whenever we had a fire drill or when something was happening that I needed to get them over to me quickly, I would just sing that song. So it gets into their habit life. Yeah, so don't let it be daunting. I mean, many of you have shared that you're already singing songs. It could be as simple as, this is the way we wash our hands early in the morning. And maybe that's gonna, instead of talking and giving instructions of what they need to do, rather than always talking to them, which is what I remember as a parent doing a lot to my young children. They don't need all of that. Maybe it's just ushering them into the bathroom and singing that song, and they'll know what to do and they'll sing it with you. So those are the kinds of things we do in a Waldorf school when we use music. It's mostly singing. We do have some instruments, and we could talk about that too, I believe.
Right. Instruments, they don't have to be expensive. Use nature. There is so much that makes sound all around us every day, including just your body, clapping, snapping, stopping your feet, patting your legs, using that internal rhythm to help calm children, regulate them, but then also, get them through the transitions, as Vicky was just describing, that can be challenging for a lot of children. I know you all know that already. So use music as a way to calm the group as you transition. Maybe it's something you have to go from outside to inside or from mealtime to nap time. Use music as a way to get them through that and to help make it predictable. If you're singing the same song every day, that's a routine. And like Vicky said, they're going to know what to do. And they're going to feel like, I know exactly what's expected of me, and I'm going to follow the instruction of the song.
And Grace, you hit on a great subject too about, when you're singing, you're really self-regulating. Your breathing is, and that's really calming for a child. It's also calming, like you said, to know what to expect when. So if it's the same song, don't think it's boring for them. They love repetition. That really at age, from anywhere from birth to 5, 6 years old, they really do love repetition because that's how they learn. So don't be afraid of using the same songs, and don't be afraid of even making instruments. We have children who are making drums just by finding branches and things to beat their drum and create a drum on. We also what else do we use? Oh, when you spoke about snapping and things, we imitate, like this is a storm coming, maybe the wind's blowing. So that's music in a way. And then we'll say, let's have pitter patter of the rain. If it's raining out, someone in one of the breakout sessions talked about coming inside when it rains and looking out the big picture window. And maybe it's doing some snapping noises and then thunder, so they love things like that. So you can make it a game, some of the music or the pieces that are where they're really learning to, learning about what's around them and how we can mimic what's around them.
I saw that Social in the chat also shared that room number 4 shared weather sounds too. They like to do that, incorporating weather sounds into their music, which is great.
Yeah.
And speaking of weather, we have some lovely clouds on the screen here to signal our next section that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this idea of rhythm. And I am, again, going to skip this video. It's a great one, focused mainly on early childhood. It's a great watch. I will send it to you. But since we have Vicky, I want to here with us today, I want to make sure that we have enough time for those questions that I know Vicky loves to answer. But diving into this idea of rhythm, a Waldorf program understands the day as a balance of in-breaths and out-breaths. So an in-breath is something where it's more teacher-led, mealtime, story time, child and caregiver, child and educator come together. It's a time of bonding and togetherness. And an out-breath is something that is more child-led, periods of free play, self-discovery, typically involves a lot more movement as well. And we have a couple examples from Vicky's program on the slide too. And I also think about it as structured and unstructured time. So we're going to give some examples of different activities that could be both in breaths and out breaths, but I'll let Vicky speak on this first before we do that.
Okay, yeah, I would just say, it's interesting. We all talked in the first breakout session about our schedules, our curriculums, and some of us have a daily schedule, some of us are pretty loose with it. We have a very kind of a tight rhythm, but it doesn't mean that it's an in-breath, meaning it's something that we really ask the children to be their highest self, or we ask for them, to have some discipline in it. And then the out breath might be free play. And the way we structure our daily schedule or rhythm is an in breath and then an out breath, an in breath and an out breath. And what we find is when it's one of the best tools we have as teachers, so I would say as childcare providers as well, for instilling discipline, because it helps the children stay regulated so they don't fall apart. And everything in and around us has a rhythm, our heartbeat, the moon, the life cycles of a plant, a day in the life of a bumblebee. All of it has rhythm. And so it's something that we work really hard as teachers to have in our classrooms, and it really helps nourish the children on every level. So I would encourage you to look at your day, and if you have like 3 out breaths, maybe look at putting an in breath in between 2 out breaths to help carry the children through that day a little easier. So
And I think about, in a mixed age group, you will have children that, and I guess just in any group of children, you're going to have different needs for connectedness with an educator and a need for that, self-expression, something that's more child-led. So the younger the child, the more they're going to need those in-breaths of feeling connected to a caregiver. So there might, it's an extra challenge as a family childcare provider to balance those needs when you have an array of ages.
Good.
So, Vicky, I'm just going to turn it over to you to talk about art and its place in Waldorf.
Okay, I'm going to be brief so we can get to some of the questions.
Right.
So art here, you see a picture, or 3 different pictures of, these are from my Wonder Garden classroom. Art is about the process and not the results in a Waldorf curriculum. So, and hopefully that could be something that you could incorporate into yours. We do all kinds of things. You probably have seen God's eyes before, where you just take yarn and wrap it around 2 branches. I just did this right before this session, so I used chopsticks, but just simple craft ideas. Let's see, what else do I have? We've done some felting of balls, all kinds of crafts. This one here on to the left is we just took branches and twine and we made like these little wreaths for fall. It could be any season though. We went for a nature walk and picked things and then put it in there. We've also done leaf prints, which you see the middle picture. A child who's 3 years old is painting on top of a leaf and then making prints, imprinting it. And then the third picture is a wet on wet painting. And that's something that's very, I guess I'll call it Waldorfy. We actually soak the watercolor paper in water and then sponge it off, but it's still quite wet. And then we use watercolor paint on it and it helps it flow. And the children don't have to work that hard. It just kind of flows together. We start at the beginning of the year with one color and then we add another color later on in the year. But these are things that you could do at home very easily. I do a lot of looking up Pinterest crafts and bring those kinds of things, which you could do as well. There was one or two. I think what I'll do is maybe share a few of the maybe pictures and send them to you, Grace, for you to forward on so
That'd
that
be
you
great.
can find, some things that you could do art-wise. But when I say it's the process and not the result, we just really encourage the child to be creative. And if it turns out it doesn't look good, it's fine. It's really about like getting involved in the process and enjoying the process, because otherwise they won't like to do art or any crafts. So.
And now we'll get into cooking, which I love this aspect of Waldorf. A lot of your day is potentially could be preparing meals, right?
Absolutely. I love this about Waldorf, and I would love it for all of you to think about how you can, what kinds of foods and things that you can make where you involve, and you probably already do this, the children in that process. So we have raised garden beds, and I heard some of you in the breakout sessions talk about picking and things from the garden. That's a perfect time for singing things like when we bake bread once a week, we have them make the dough. And then we sing, sprinkle, sprinkle, fairy dust. And we put the flour down on the table. And then, we sing this whole song about it. And then we sing another song saying lots of sticky buns. It goes, lots of sticky buns in the baker's shop, sweet and good with the honey on the top. Along came, and then the child's name, with a penny one day. He bought a sticky bun and he ate it right away. And then we just go around and they all sing while they're kneading the bread and making the rolls. And then we love eating them once a week as well. We have them make stone soup, where they're chopping vegetables. And you wouldn't think so, but 3-year-olds are great when you teach them how to chop, make sure that it's like a plastic knife and they're sawing at the beginning when they're 3 years old, but they're wonderful at, helping and in the kitchen. And we do most of this work outside because we do spend so much time outside. But they can cut carrots and help make the stone soup. They're involved in all of the aspects of making our food in a Waldorf education setting. So, and it just helps them learn small motor skills. I tell a story of stone soup at the beginning of the year, and they ask me to tell it every week when we serve stone soup. And actually somebody gets the stone in their soup. It's on the bottom of their bowl each week, and they think it's like the luckiest thing in the whole world. So yeah, it's try to involve them in that process.
And babies.
Can I say something real quick? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Yeah.
Can she please refer those songs to me? I would love to learn those.
Yes. I'm happy you want to hear the
Yeah.
songs? Did I hear you right?
The songs that she just sent me just sung, I would like a listen or email so I can learn them as well.
Yes, and Vicky did. Yeah, you sent me a whole list of those songs, your classics. So I am going to send those out to you.
Okay,
because
appreciate it.
we don't expect you to remember all of those, but they're great.
There is. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And before we move on from cooking, babies can help too. They can dump ingredients into bowls. You can give them, a safe for infants utensil that's not being used for them to, fling around. So just the feeling of being included is what you're fostering in a Waldorf program. And one of the ways you do that is through cooking together.
And keep in mind too, I'm just going to add, I saw somebody, Mecca Vaughn, in the chat room, singing Hot Cross Buns, Do You Know the Muffin Man? A lot of the classics you probably already know them. Your parents may have sung them to you, nursery rhymes and things. So, use those as well. It makes everything more fun.
All right. And one last activity that you can do, incorporate in your program that is more Waldorfy in nature, is this idea of handwork. And it begins in early childhood. It becomes much more complicated as you get into middle childhood and adolescence in a Waldorf school. But this would just be, you see examples, there's a lot going on this slide, but anything that involves those fine motor skills. And correct me if I'm wrong, Vicky, but you are creating something with those hands, whether it be weaving or finger knitting or cross stitching. And I actually do have, I have a video library of how-to videos that I will send you if you want to explore different options for handwork. And I see, Vicky, you're fiddling with something.
I just was playing with a piece of yarn, and I was going to say, we make up verses for it, like in through the window, stand up tall, pull my tail to make me small. And the children, we teach them this at 3 years old. And what you end up doing, what you referred to, Grace, as finger knitting, it's just using one piece of yarn. And I'm doing it fairly quickly, but what we do is we end up doing this with the children, and we make things like when we make our lanterns, we make lanterns with the children, and we go on a lantern walk in the fall, in November. We use this finger knitting, and we make the handle for our lanterns using this finger knitting. So we're always like making things and using our hands. Yeah, and then the other one that I actually make with the children are boo-boo buddies. And this is online. You can just easily get this. I have like a thing that a heart that goes in the freezer. And I keep this in the freezer. And whenever someone gets an owie or a boo-boo, they can put this boo-boo bunny made out of a face cloth and a ribbon, basically. They can use this, which is nice. So we're always
so
making
cute.
things. Yeah.
And you're probably wondering, well, what about the babies? What about the littles for, some of those things? And we've been trying to incorporate that throughout today. But just want to make sure that we highlight for babies and toddlers, the most important aspect for this age group is establishing that daily rhythm for the children. This is when we eat. This is when we sleep. This is when we play. And they are learning this through the help of their caregivers, through their educators, at you as a family child care educator. And as Vicky already mentioned, it's very important for you to think about what it means to be a role model because, as you all already know, babies and toddlers learn through imitation. That's their main way of learning about the world around them.
Whether I'm going to say like it's a blessing and a curse, right? We all know that. They'll repeat the words we say. So we just always have to be really careful of what we say, or they'll repeat what we do. So,
right. And now we're just going to go through just some examples of Waldorf environments that are in home-based settings. So I would just encourage you, I'll just take a few moments on each slide just as examples. I can send these out after the fact as well, the slide deck for tonight's presentation, if you think that would be helpful. But just as we go through, notice the colors, the soft lighting, the greenery, the materials in the space are made with organic materials. As I'm sure you've seen, Vicky has brought up a few things that are made of wool or cloth. So yeah, I'll let the pictures speak for themselves. I see a lot of baskets, woven baskets that you could find at thrift stores too, to hold materials in.
Yeah, and the materials could be as simple, what we have in our classroom are pine cones and acorns and shells in baskets. And then when they play, they might make stone soup because they see that we're making the stone soup, and they'll do their own. And we bring in, I go to Goodwill and I get pots and pans for them to play with as well.
Again, lots of wood. And I'm seeing in both of these photos, actually, there is almost like, I'm not sure what the word is for this, but like a scene laid out. You can see at the back corner there where they might reenact a play.
Oh, we call that the nature table. Yeah.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep.
You can see another one there.
Usually they're seasonal. And then if a child finds something in nature, like a acorn, we might have them put it on the table.
Neat. You'll see this is not something new. A lot of child-sized furniture. These children are making a fort. I noticed when I look, I mean, you know it's a Waldorf program just from the aesthetics. And I know the environment is a very important part of a Waldorf program because it's helping to, the aesthetically pleasing environment is supposed to help calm children, right, Vicky?
It is. We don't have any fluorescent lights in our school. We use mostly natural lighting, and then maybe some floor lamps. So it's very similar to your family if you're doing a family childcare setting, something similar. We try to make it very inviting and, like you said, pleasing aesthetically so that it invites the child to use their imagination, a lot of space. And then keep in mind too, we only spend 25% of the time now inside. We're mostly outdoors, which is lovely because it's a much more curative environment for them. There's not a lot of things we need to say, like when we're inside, we might say, we don't want them to run around inside maybe because they might get hurt. So we might say, please use your walking feet, because we don't want to use negative things like stop running. We'd say, use your walking feet. But we find that when they're outside, there's less instruction, there's less discipline. They can just be who they are and do what they need to do and be kids.
I see a garden in this photo. A very natural, simple climbing structure, that old stump there.
Yeah, we have stumps are great, by the way, if you can get stumps for them to crawl in and for them to build with. It's great.
And here are just some examples of Waldorf materials that I'm sure you saw in the photos we just looked through and that we have been talking about. But again, you're going to see if you go and start searching Waldorf, there are a lot of really high quality materials out there. They're also very expensive, and you don't necessarily need to fill your program with extremely expensive materials. You can go out in nature. You can make your own blocks, make your own dolls even. That's a little bit more complicated. That's a bit intimidating for me, but I know there's how-tos out there, right, Vicki?
There are, yeah.
And another thing I do love that is pretty unique to Waldorf is the play silks. And and that's pictured here on the bottom left-hand corner. But these are just almost like, correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki, like tiny blankets that they can
Yeah.
They're very thin
Right.
and they can use as like a cape or a baby blanket to wrap their doll in, or there's just so many, again, fostering that creativity, so many uses for just one open-ended material like a play silk. All right.
Questions, yay.
Questions, what did you think? Any questions that, and I'm seeing that they would love the list of songs.
Mhm. Can I share maybe when someone's thinking of a question? I forgot to share one of our finger plays, and I find that to be a really good thing when you're as childcare providers and some of the olders might be waiting for the youngers to get dressed. I sometimes do finger games, and I'll just do one.
Yes. Oh, hold on, Vicky. I
Yeah.
will spotlight you so that
Okay. You can see better. Yeah.
There we go.
So finger plays are really beautiful with the children, and many of you probably know them from way back when, like a nursery rhyme. You can make them up too. The one that I'm going to do is this is a little girl, and this is her bed. This is her pillow, and this is her head. These are her blankets. Cover her tight, sing her a lullaby, and kiss her good night. And this is the little boy, and this is his bed. This is his pillow, and this is his head. These are his blankets. Cover him tight, sing him a lullaby, and kiss him good night. We use these finger plays all the time. Again, it helps to regulate the children. It helps when some of the kids are dressed in winter clothes, sitting on a steps, and the other ones haven't finished. So I might do while they're getting dressed and finishing, I might do some finger games with the children, and they're actually imitating me as I do them. So there's a bunch of them. I can send you a copy of them because there's no music. It's just saying them, and you can practice them.
That'd be great. Thank you, Vicky. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and all of your knowledge about Waldorf education with us today and really making this special. So thank you so much. And
my joy. Thank you.